Welcome to Wrinkled Wisdom. Today we're sitting down with our media guy, Wayne. After we got some episodes out, we wanted to talk about kind of what we're up to. I know people have been getting some traffic onto our stuff, and we really want to give the consumer an idea of what we're up to and why we're up to it. So we thought we'd sit down and have a discussion, and that way see if this is something for you.
Yeah. This whole project, we want to make sure that we come across as... we want to make sure we get the right message across here, because a lot of stuff that we talk about on the podcast is very important to a lot of people, and it can be a little bit tempting from time to time to take messages and take them kind of the wrong way. But in reality, this whole project is all about preserving the wisdom and stories from people who have lived some very interesting lives. So far, how many episodes have we put out?
What are we?
I think it's a 5.
We're at 4 or 5 episodes out.
Yeah, I think at the time of recording this, we're about at 5 episodes, and already some of the most interesting people that I've had the pleasure of working with, man, beautiful people, beautiful stories. It's such a privilege just to be able to hear this stuff, and it makes you wonder how many people are out there right now that just have no idea the power that their stories hold. And
I think like Flo said it, she was so unassuming, and I think it's crazy because you don't, all the stories I've gathered over the years, I like to say my young life here, but just you sit down with these people everywhere, if you, at the airport, at the bar, it could be in the shopping center, you realize that there's just incredible people right around you. And it seems like we're so caught up in this game of, it seems like there's just so much divisiveness that's guarding us from stepping out of our boundary to say hi or talk to somebody else, and whether it's a generational gap or a political gap or just maybe just life experiences itself. But I think that's the message we're trying to get across is to kind of bridge all of those things.
Of course. And that's really all it is. And like you say, we really are at a time, at least in this country, where our fellow Americans, I mean, there's never been so much infighting and divisiveness. At the end of the day, we really are all in this together. Yeah. I think the reason that so many people are afraid to branch out and be exposed to new ideas, new people, is because we've been told so many times by whoever's putting out the major content, exactly, right, that the other side's out to get us, and we're not sure who's on the other side. But in reality, we are all on the same side. I mean, we should always want
the best for humanity, for sure.
Exactly. And that's really what this is all about, because as this goes on, we're going to get people from a wide spectrum of life experiences, beliefs, values, stuff like that, and hearing their story and what brought them to believe in these things and live their life this way, I think will resonate with a wide audience of people, and that's what I think the beauty of this podcast is.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's so many aspects of it that when I was kind of creating this in my head over many years, is that you realize too, not only is that person so unique. Every individual is unique. None of us are the same. Nobody, even twins with the same DNA are two different people because they live life differently. Mm-hmm. And what you see is you see families and family members care so much, because in the end, I've thought about this, is really all we have are our stories, eventually. And then all people have of us are the stories of us. And that's kind of how we live on, unfortunately, after our passing, which is inevitable. But, I've heard multiple times now from interviewees, some on the podcast, some after, is how proud they are when they sit there and tell their story.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think about this being a father. It's like, we keep, you learn it's so important to tell your kids how proud you are of them. But what I kind of realized, I never realized how important it was to tell our grandparents and our aunts and uncles and our parents how proud we are of them. Like it's a two-way street, and so there's going to be so many things as we evolve in this. But and the families are so proud to get their stories of their family member, to cherish that forever. Like to have this, like we're in such a beautiful time where you get to have these stories now forever because we're storing them on the cloud or we're storing them somewhere. There's backups on backups on backups. And now with the technology and what we're able to do here, we're creating a system where when people pass on, we're not, I think it was you that told me this. We're not burning down the library of their stories.
No. Yeah.
I think it's
incredibly important because at least now there's such an emphasis on the people whose stories are worth hearing are the ones that are in front of the camera, the people that everybody knows about. And those are individuals like you and I. And really what our society is a culmination of all of our life stories up to that point, when you think about it. In order to understand humans just in general, we have to understand each individual's story that contributed to that shared experience. Right. And I think hearing the stories that we've gotten so far, it really helps at least me understand kind of the journey of our nation, our history, us as a people, society, hearing what they believe, how they came to believe that, and the events that were going on during this that helped shape them.
Yeah.
Of course, if we had this podcast in, say, 80 years from now, right, it would be totally, totally different.
Yeah.
Because of the events and the experiences and the social, what people believe in our culture right now,
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of humanity. We don't always have to agree or go through the same things, but we're all wired to deal with hardships and triumphs in a certain way that make us into the people that we are.
Right.
And really, for people who listen to this podcast, I'm sure there's been a time for everybody where they felt like I'm the only person who understands myself right now. Nobody else is dealing with this. And it's really hard to get people to understand what I'm dealing with right now.
Right.
And what's the point of me explaining this to anybody, because they're not going to understand. And hopefully some of these episodes you're able to listen and resonate with some of these people as they describe what they've been through and kind of where they're coming from. Because at least for me, when I hear stuff like that from somebody who's gone through it and succeeded and found, success on the other side of a hardship, it makes me feel like I can do whatever is this obstacle is in front of me.
Yeah, I think that's a thing too. I think you hit the nail on the head there in multiple ways, but the one that sticks out to me is that we tend to go through life with our generation, right? Like we relate with our friends, with our spouses and things like that. Well, lives are so different that you're not always going to find somebody that has experienced, whether it's a success or a hardship that you're going through. And so it's really hard at those times to relate. But if you get to the level of people that have lived the most life on a numerical value, they probably have. And they give some of the best advice. Although they didn't live in the same time, but there's ways that you can quickly with your mind relate and be like, well, this wasn't exact, because nothing is really, exact, but it's very similar. And there's going to be stories, and I can tell you that we have some coming up where you're going to talk about people they're going to talk about themselves, in a very low point in their life and what brought them out of it. But not only that, you're going to be able to see the life they lived after. And we've talked about this before between you and I. That is really one of the major reasons that I wanted to do this also, is because I feel like there's been times I've had a victim personality, where I've gotten into this victim role, and I think we all do it at times. But I was always able to reflect on my grandparents' stories or relatives. Like, I had a great uncle who was crippled almost his whole life, and he was a principal, he was a coach, crippled, but he was able to coach and he was overcome that. And my grandparents, we talked about this, they lost their oldest son in an accident.
Right.
And my grandpa, who's so amazing, both of my grandparents are amazing, but like I think I told you that one time where my grandpa, his best friend gave him a tree, and they planted it when my uncle passed, which was before I was born. And we were working out in the yard one time, And my grandpa looked at that tree and he said something along the lines of like, I can't believe Tommy's been gone longer than he was here.
Oof.
And I said to my grandpa, I was like, I'm really sorry that happened, Grandpa. And he looked at me. My grandpa's always been able to say so much with so few words. And he said, sometimes you just have to believe in a bigger plan. You have to believe that there's a bigger plan. And that's one thing I've learned so far is a lot of this generation carries so much faith with them. And that was their that bound their values to get them through all these things. And then not to, just to bring up my grandpa again too, but he also in his young adulthood lost his father and his brother who was a year younger than him within a very short period of time together.
Yeah.
And those are that's some of the most devastating things that can ever happen to an individual.
Right.
And my grandparents have, I give them so much credit for being so damn strong.
Yeah.
Because they would tell me these things and I was able to see them as I grew up, and they were able to tell their stories when they could have been victims or their hardships. And it gave me perspective growing up for many situations where it could be so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just something I've really held value to. And and I try and instill that in my daughter. And that's another part of this. Not to ramble, I'll give it back to you in a second, but another thing, because this, it leads into these already the values that have come. We've been out for just 5 weeks?
Yep.
5 weeks now.
This is week 6. Yeah. Going up. Yep.
We've been interviewing for about 2 months. And I had one of my daughter's friend's parents come up to me and he says, I listen to the podcast on my way to work every day. He'll listen to a bit of it on his way to work. I guess it can't be every day or he'd be through them all, but almost every day.
Yeah.
But he told me every day, but
we appreciate it.
Yeah. But he said when, Grammy or Joanne, I call her Grammy because it's my friend's grandma and they call her Grammy. But he said that he used that example of what she went through in her childhood. And he used scenarios, not only talked to his wife about it, but he was talking about how his kids live in this very safe bubble. Mm-hmm. And he's using these stories to raise his kids. And I'm like, that is what we're doing.
Yeah.
That I just got goosebumps talking about it, because that is exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to take the oldest generation stories and push them down through generations for lessons and give, because a lot of people out there don't have their grandparents anymore. They don't have these people to confide in. Many of my friends have lost their parents and grandparents, even in their late 30s. And what a gift it is, and what courage it takes for these people to come on and tell their story. And it's just, so far, I'm just I just got a little more enthused, but I'm just so enthused about how it's playing its way out.
Yeah. And what you say about, he said that his kids lived in this safe bubble, and that's, we live in a very specific, we've never gone through this kind of tech boom before in our civilization, where we are able to keep our people, our people in our family, like our young ones, safe and everything, because we're able to track them. We're able to see where they are. Yep. We're able to, put all these restrictions on them. But also with that advent of the internet, never have they been more exposed to some of the worst stuff, in the world without having to actually live it. And so a lot of people who are, maybe in my generation or younger, they are aware of these things, but they've never had to deal with them before, right? So they hear all these stories and they hear and they see all this stuff, and they, we never really know how we're going to react, right? Until we're in a certain situation. We live in the age of information, but simultaneously we also live in just complete, ignorance almost, where the age of information is also the age of disinformation. Right. And, cause for me, you always know what you think you'll do in these situations, right? But hearing it from somebody who's actually gone through it and lived it kind of makes you think, oh, wait a second, maybe I wouldn't or shouldn't handle the situation this way. Or maybe, because you never know how you're going to respond to hardships or triumph.
Right. I think that's why people right now I mean, to make it, not to make it political, but just in human nature right now, where people think they know what they're going to do in a situation. We just saw that on July 13th, you know, with I call it a successful assassination attempt, because the attempt was successful. The assassination was not successful.
Right.
But when Trump stood up, you know, and gave to show strength for his supporters, I mean, that is the level that if it was not captured on camera, you would not believe it.
Right.
Or, you know, or you could hear these stories, but it takes witnesses. It takes individual accounts to tell these stories, to give you that perspective, because a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of the stuff we see right now in this technological world is Hollywood or manufactured, right? And
Exactly.
I think we talked about this with Flo when she was talking about her childhood in World War II, and they're talking, you know, the bombs are dropping, and she was talking about, well, we didn't really know. Well, they didn't really know because Hollywood really hadn't been developed yet. You only knew from that experience.
Right.
And when she was talking about that, I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, like we think we know what war is and bombs are dropping because we get to see it on the television or the computer.
Yeah. We've seen all these movies, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Not even close.
Not even. No. Cause you never know.
You can know a little bit, like you can be fearful and have a perspective in that way, but hearing her firsthand account on a childhood in the middle of World War II in Europe is just, that blew my mind.
Yeah, it was almost better than if somebody were to just capture that on camera and you're able to watch it, because you hear it from somebody and you can hear it in their voice, how it affected them, and they share their thoughts on the matter. When you're like, oh wait, I never realized that maybe if I was being bombed, oh wait, I also wouldn't have water, or I wouldn't be able to, you know, I what if I wasn't with my family? What if I didn't know where my dad was? You know, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's just something that kind of goes to show, like, life experience trumps just general information pretty much any day of the week.
Right.
That's something that we continuously see with these people. The stories that they tell are insane.
Yeah. And that's the idea, right? Is to get the, you know, the people who watch this podcast or listen to it, is to not only hear like of a situation or to hear a story, the idea, or what I hope, I think is going to happen with the way that the human brain works. And if you listen to these podcasts throughout the podcast, the idea is to hear about a situation in their life and then what occurred after. That is very important. That is very important, because these people have lived decades after, you know, some of the most eventful times normally in your youth, because you're a little bit more reckless, or you're,
right.
You know, some of it's timing, but a lot of it's because you're more adventurous. You're out doing more. You're trying to get more experiences. And I think that it just amazes me consistently where we hear of these hardships. And that's what we're going to see with this generation, because, and well, you're going to see it in both of them because of the way the wars and stuff played out through the timeline and other things. But you're going to see where they went through these experiences in their young life and how it shaped them into later in life. And sometimes I think that's the fear that our generation has, is what is my life going to be like later? Yeah.
Especially if you're going through a hardship, it's very easy to arrive at the conclusion that my life is over. Like, it's like, this is the worst thing that could happen to me. How do I come back from this? I can't, because you haven't experienced overcoming that specific obstacle or an obstacle of that size before. It's easy to think, well, you know, I guess I'm just stuck here forever. I'm going to, you know, that was it. You know, I guess I'm just going to continue. No, it's impossible to, especially when you're young, you don't really realize, and I'm young, right? And I understand, you know, there's a limit to my knowledge, especially because the guys usually sit in the seat a lot more wrinkled and have a lot more wisdom than I do. Right. And so, but the thing is especially high school age going into college, you have been sheltered, you know, from a lot of things up until that point, right? You've never had to like, you've never been sent to collections. You've never, you know, this, you know, it's stuff like that. And it's easy to think the first time that happens, it's like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to deal with this for the rest of my life. Well, you know, all this stuff. But no, it's extremely important the issue itself is not as important as how you respond to it.
Right.
And you can either roll over and let it happen, or you can just take care of it and move on, become better from it.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? Like most everything is like 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it's weird to look back on a lot of these things just through the generations of like how safe we've been in our homeland. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very unique to America.
We, especially right now, looking at the news, like these cities are being bombed over in a different continent and all this stuff. And I just today I saw a video of, I think it was somewhere, I think Ukraine a certain offensive, and there was, in Russia, there was this village being bombed. Right. And, I can imagine, I'm like, well, my city's never been bombed. Right. And, we definitely live a very privileged life here in America where we're not having to go out and bomb shelters and stuff. And, I think that there's just so much perspective out in the world that we don't have, that I think it's very important to hear from people who have lived through something like that. Just because, like I said before, we always think we know what we do,
right? But
you don't until you do it,
right? That's the beauty, I think, too, of what we're doing here is we've talked about this, you and I, multiple times, where we want to go global. Like, excuse me, we're not. I'm not trapped in the borders of the United States. I'm not going to travel to like Russia or Ukraine anytime soon.
No, I won't either.
But not to laugh about it, but that's the severity of what's going on over there. But we want to get people from all over the world. I'm in talks with some refugees from Vietnam, that were imprisoned after the Vietnam War and things like that, just to get their perspective, because I think that's really important for us. Because right now, what I feel from what I see on the news is so many people are so ungrateful for what we have here. And I'd really like to get some perspective on those stories and get people. And even if you're watching this or you have a family member or know somebody, don't be shy to reach out to us. We want people from all walks of life. I mean, it's as long as they're 70 years old or older, we'll put them on if they want to tell their story.
Yeah, every story is worth hearing. Every single story is worth hearing. And speaking of going global and speaking with those the refugees that you had lined up, I also think that plays into, unfortunately, there's a rhetoric in our country at the moment where there seems to be not necessarily a want for political violence, civil war type situation, but a comfortability with, if this happens, I'm going to take care of business. I don't think, I think that if people were to ever see war in person, I think they might be a little bit slower. To arrive at that conclusion. And to hear from people who have lived through experiences that I could never fathom during wartime. I think battling your fellow American just over something as stupid as who they voted for. I think maybe we'd be a little bit slower to arrive at the conclusion that we need to go fight each other.
I agree. I think that it's even, we've gotten some comments on this stuff where people, that is I believe that to be their intent, is because the person is so different than they are. And it's like, I didn't grow up in a world like that. No. Like I grew up where I remember this. I don't know if you guys did this as kids, but I think I was a kid in Jacksonville, Florida. We'd play football all the time. The weather was almost always good there. So we were always in the yard playing football or doing something. Well, something would happen and then somebody would make like a "your mama" joke. And they'd be like, hey, you can't say that. And they'd be like, it's a free country. And we'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. You're like, you're right. It is. America is a free country. You can say that.
Dang it, got me.
What's crazy is how much you learn as a child when you're doing that, because what I just thought about this recently. It's like, then you realize, like, you know what? It is a free country. You get to choose how you respond.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, and also, I know this sounds crazy, but I think that those type of events growing up, they built my confidence in my character. Like, because I was just because you learn like, oh, that's not going to affect me. That's not going to affect me. And what happened is I truly believe that shaped me to be so, I mean, everything shapes you, right? Mm-hmm. But it helped me be so, I would like call myself a conversationalist, you know, like, because I'm not afraid of what people are going to say. I had a guy in the gym. We got into a heated political argument in the sauna the other day. The guy's name's David too.
Sitting in the hot seat.
Yeah. And credit to him if he watches this, because he's done a great job of taking care of his health. He's lost a lot of weight. So, I like to cheer people on and do stuff like that. And we got into it, man. Well, I hadn't been to the gym for a few weeks, and I walk in this morning and he comes up to me. I say, hey, and he comes up to me off the row machine, or he was doing lat pulls. He comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, puts his arm on me. He's like, hey, I'm really sorry about being, that. He's like, I got really emotional. And I was like, dude, I appreciate that. I was like, but you don't ever have to apologize to me. Like that. I don't let it. Huh. I'm pretty confident in who I am and what I believe in. And I'm glad that you believe strongly enough in something that you're willing to stand up for it. Because if you're not going to stand up for your beliefs, what's the point of believing in anything?
Exactly.
You know?
That's where that balance comes in of like, I believe certain things to be true at my core, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that I live by, right? But at the same time, I'm also open to learning, right? So if I ever end up wrong about something, I'm always making sure that I have my mind open in a way where I'm like able to receive that as something that is not a personal affront to who I am, right?
Right.
Like if somebody says, hey, like you're actually wrong about this, maybe long held belief.
Yeah.
And if I am, I don't have a reason to hold that belief any longer than I should. Right. And so it's like, you should never apologize for something that you believe in, because just because somebody says you're wrong doesn't mean that they're right.
Right.
And that's the beauty of this country, is we're able to believe these things. We're not told what to believe. We're not told that we need to, you have to do this, you have to be this, you have to, and although we might not all agree on what everybody should be, the beauty is the only person you really have to listen to is yourself.
Right.
There's a reason that you've arrived at the conclusion that you have, and you should respect your previous life experiences enough to be, hey, this is who I am. This is what I believe. I don't have to be like everybody else. That's how we arrive at, that's how we learn new things. That's how new things come about. That's how we improve upon existing systems.
Right. And that's another great example of why we're doing what we're doing. Because if you go get the information from the generations that have lived, let's say 5 decades longer than us, that much more experience, you're almost time traveling for that.
Right.
Like in a sense, you're getting that perspective after all of that. Mm-hmm. And so what you're doing is a lot of those things that we're trying to work out within our own lives right now, sometimes you can bypass that hard work and effort. Mm-hmm. if you can talk to somebody long enough or get the right information from them, where they can be like, yeah, well, I actually did this, and this, and I changed my mind about this.
Right.
Or I believed this when I was young, and that's what helped me stay true to this throughout my whole life.
Right.
And it's almost like we're scamming the system, trying to get all this information from the people that have lived 5 decades longer than us, or 4 to 5. But it's that's another thing I thought about. It's like, man, it's so nice to get this information from people, so I can already, if you trust them, right? Mm-hmm. if you appreciate who their character is, and you kind of envy their life, and you respect what they've done, and you look at them as I would say like a role model type individual, and they give you information, boom, take it.
Especially if it's applicable to your circumstances.
Yeah, we can do it quick. You don't have to read a book. You can do it through a podcast.
Yeah, you should always learn from your mistakes, and if it's possible, you can learn from other people's as well.
I think that's the beauty in like what Joe Rogan's done. It's like, you look at what Joe Rogan done. He's literally sat down with people from all different walks of life, and you can see his intellectual progression.
Oh yeah.
And it's documented very well. And I'm like, that's sweet.
He's another one of those guys who says the same thing. He says, there's been many times on his podcast where he talks about where he had something that he believed pretty strongly, and then somebody came in and was like, hey, look at all this.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, dang.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for showing me. I can't believe, I had the wrong idea about all this. And he's, although Joe Rogan might not be a PhD holder and all this stuff, being able to learn something new from somebody who might know a little bit more than you it's a very valuable and rare skill to have.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of rare just because how often we get, like, it seems like people get mad at somebody else for thinking something different.
Yeah.
Right. But in reality, there's a lot to be learned between those two individuals. You never want to be surrounded by people who are exactly the same as you.
Yeah. What do they say? They say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you just imagine just hanging out with clones of yourself, what new information are you learning? Right. How are you growing? How are you progressing through life? Right. You get one shot at this. You should try to expose yourself to as many different, sources of knowledge and perspectives and worldviews as you can, just so maybe you can perfect your own. You don't have to believe the same thing as that person, but maybe you can learn to maybe love somebody maybe you don't like them at the moment and you're not sure why. Maybe you can gain some perspective on how this person who is a polar opposite of you has arrived at their conclusion so that you can learn to love them.
Yeah.
It's a hard skill to have, and it's hopefully through stuff like this and whatever other means, real life experience, hopefully people can learn that it's okay to be, to believe what you want to believe. It's okay.
I think one thing that's cool too is you understand when you're visiting with all these people is you learn a little bit about how the older generations, I think, were very good at understanding intent.
That's extremely important.
They weren't looking at the surface, because it's very easy to get for your, let's say to feel like you're taking an emotional beating or to get emotional about something on the surface. But if you can see behind the curtains and understand what is their intent, like, is this a good person? Do they want the best for me? Mm-hmm. Do they want the best for my family, my surroundings? I think that is important. I think a lot of people are going to gain that skill if you listen to this long enough, where you're going to be like, you're going to get better at understanding people's intent. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think that's where I believe we'll start to bind together as a society again, is because you're going to understand that most of us have the exact same intent. Yeah, it's to live in prosperity, healthy, take care of your family, love your friends, be loved, and and live a good life, and hopefully leave a good impact on what you leave behind us. But I think that's something that I think we're just gaining. I don't know. I've had so much time to think, man. Some of these interviews I can't stop thinking about. Oh
yeah, we've had some really good ones. I mean, I'm usually behind the camera watching, or when I'm here, and just sitting back there. There have been times where I've been sitting back there with my mouth wide open, just that's crazy. Yeah. Especially the Bob Songer episode. I was just hearing about some of the stuff that he was talking about. Man, it's crazy. And what you were talking about, how that generation seems to be better about understanding intent. I also think they're better about understanding nuance. So like a certain situation is not just black or white. It's also, there's a lot of gray area there. It's a person maybe has arrived at a certain spot in their life via a very specific route. Mm-hmm. Not everybody takes that same path to get to a certain point. And all that nuance that leads to a certain thing has a huge impact on that person and who they are. And they understand that because those people from that generation lived very different lives from each other. Yeah. I mean, they might have been going through the same thing, but they all had to arrive at a place of food security, financial security, just general physical security with all, going off to war, stuff like that. Yeah, right. They all had to just get there by any means necessary a lot of the time. So I think they all understood that, and they were all through that able to understand their fellow American a bit better. Right.
And I think with security, when you go back on security, one thing I feel about, this is a belief of mine, is even with like, whether it's, financial security, I'll say your security of your health, security of your safety, unseen impact on your health, as far as, let's say car crashes, things like that. We've made cars safer. So you'll notice what happened to our speed limits. They went up. Mm-hmm. We've created these mechanisms where if you create a secure environment, whether it's in your home or your life or whatever, you're able to be more free thinking, I would say. You're able to get places faster. You're able to, and that's one thing I've learned too from these, when you have somebody from growing up in war, you have people that worked in the military, you have, we've had sheriffs, we've had people that have left countries to come to America and learn the language. They create every one of them so far that I've noticed has created a sense of security around them, whether it was in their home with their family or if it was in, or it was what they were doing, if they were creating security for a community or a society. And I looked back on like what's happened in America and I'm like, wow, that's really why America has been able to boom and create so much for humanity globally, is because we have had this security. Yeah. And I think right now what I see with a lot of people that are afraid to go out on their own, go do things, is because there's this, I would say, paranoia of not feeling secure. Mm-hmm. You look at that, what's happened with like inflation, COVID. Oh, yeah. COVID was huge.
That was
even me. COVID, when COVID hit, I felt like so much came down. I was like, it felt like somebody just put a spike strip in the middle of the road and I was going 70 miles an hour down the freeway. And it abruptly, I think that caused a lot of psychological mayhem. And I think we're still dealing with it.
Oh yeah.
But I think if there's one thing to take away from that, is it made me realize like that can happen, but you take care of your health. Mm-hmm. Make sure you're in a position where you can audible.
Right.
And also create an environment close to you that if you do get, where you get sucked into the walls of your home or your community, that you create a life around you that will give you value, mental value and things like that.
Right. It's incredibly important. That period of time was very hard on everybody, regardless of who you are. There were so many people that I had the pleasure of meeting a ton of people throughout that time because while everybody else was locked indoors, I was in college and I had to work. Yeah. And so I worked in service. I was managing a coffee shop, and from the time that was before that happening to the time during and the time after, the shift in just people, it was incredibly sad to see.
Yeah.
It was incredibly hard on just the general public. And like you say, I think most people are still mentally recovering from that.
And some people, sorry to cut you off.
No,
some people are physically recovering. I just recently have ran into multiple elderly individuals.
Oh man.
Where they were so scared. They locked themselves in their home. Mm-hmm. They didn't go exercise. They didn't go do anything, and their bodies degraded.
Oh, and man.
I didn't even, man. Like some people that ended up wheelchair bound.
Jeez.
Because they were so, which you can't blame them.
No,
because,
not at all.
I mean, death is a scary thing. And when you're told that this is going to, you have a chance if you're, however many years old or above, that your likelihood of surviving is very little. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I've had a lot of, I'd say emotional reflection on that right now. Like, man, I feel bad that I didn't do a better job with some people or, paying attention. I kind of like, man, I mean, it's just, so now I'm kind of aware of that, but I got to give it to all of those people that are out there that take care of the elderly individuals during COVID. I know there was a lot of, in-home physical therapists and stuff going around working on that, but it's the vast, I would say, diversity of impact that had was wild.
It hit every walk of life, man. Speaking of medical professionals, I mean, I can't imagine during that time what it must have been like for them. I mean, seeing some of the pictures and stuff some of them, I think, just didn't clock out for, how many days in a row. I mean, they were just on call all the time.
Yeah.
It's happening for 2 years. We're just going to, I can't imagine. I mean, I wouldn't want to imagine. Those people are, I mean, some of the best among us for sure.
Yeah. And it's, it's sad how some of them were treated.
Incredibly sad.
Yeah. Some of the medical professionals, there was a lot of pressure put on them to do things against their will. But you were talking about your service you're working at a coffee shop in college. When you were a young, you're still pretty young, but what was your view back then compared to now of the older generation?
So actually the biggest jump I had was before I started that job to after I finished. So before I started, I, of course, as somebody who is 18, just graduated high school, I definitely thought I knew everything. Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I've got it figured out. Why am I even going to college? Don't need it. And so I go and I was incredibly lucky to have that job because the people I met working there changed the entire trajectory of my life and my worldview because I got to meet so many different people.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it be somebody who is the meanest person you've ever met or the nicest person you've ever met, you have no choice but to love everybody in that job, because if you dislike somebody and you allow them to ruin your day, right? If you let somebody else control who you are and how your day goes throughout the day, you've lost that battle, man. I mean, it's over for you. So you have to learn how to find something to like in everybody in the service industry. And something I learned through all that is to be slow to anger and quick to understand.
Yeah.
Right? And so the biggest rule for anybody working in the service industry, listen more than you speak.
Yeah.
100%. Because if you do that, you'll find a reason to be okay with whatever's happening at the register. Yeah. So the thing is a lot of people, we talk about how this country can be a bit divided, or just people in general. People don't like certain people, right? That's just how it is. But if you can just sit there and listen to somebody, regardless of their age, who they are, right? Maybe you don't understand them. There's something to like about everybody.
Oh yeah.
There really is. Especially the best way to learn that is to be in a position where you have to learn that.
Right.
And I was quickly able to get along with anybody who I had, who was on the other side of the cash register, just because, and I saw probably 1,000 people a day.
Yeah.
It was a very busy place, and not every person was the same, but they all wanted the same thing.
Their intent.
And they wanted coffee and they wanted to be listened to and understood. Yeah. Right. And if you can do that, somebody who might come up to you, and at the time I did deal with some elderly people, and back then I was like, oh man, like they're going to be mean to me. Like that's kind of the stigma is if there's somebody who's a little bit older, like we don't understand each other. We can't find common ground.
Yeah.
Some of the best customers I had, shout out to Dale, who was a 90-year-old professor who worked at the college that I was at. He came in every day, and instead of me listening to this person, he was always made sure that I was the one talking to him. Yeah. The elderly people that I served at that job were among the best people I've ever met in my entire life. Yeah. And it's really upsetting now knowing, I mean, especially the perspective that I've had on that, hearing some people my age speak so ill of, we're both humans regardless of our age. Right. We can find common ground, right? We all want to be okay. We all want to, all this stuff. And luckily I was able to learn that lesson. And I think if we just took a second and listened, I think maybe we'd all like each other a little bit more. Right.
Yeah. It's pretty cool too when you turn somebody's day around,
Exactly.
We used to have this, my grandpa owned a logging company, and we had this truck driver. He was always grumpy, man. Always grumpy.
Right.
And I could always flip his day around. And you know how? You just asked him.
Yeah.
You just asked him about his day.
It's that easy.
You asked him about himself, and he could do some reflection on his good times. I knew what his home life was like, and I knew that he had a lot going on, but man, it was like a goal of mine.
Yeah.
And people would be like, man, he was cheerful. I'm like,
and that's the thing.
Gotta talk to him.
If somebody's being mean to you, right, in a situation like that maybe you really just have to understand that they don't hate you.
Yeah.
They've had a bad day.
Yeah.
And if you can figure out really what's going on, then you don't take it personally. And maybe you can help out a bit.
You know what? And this is the thing I've thought of too. Talking about taking things personally. That's something that has become, we've come in this self-identity world of social media where it's like, oh, it's about me. You try and create this thing. So, oh, it's about me. It's about me. It's about me. Not everybody does it, but a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. But if you don't like selfish people, to have some self-reflection on that and be like, maybe if you make it about them and you don't take it personal, it is so good for your own mental health.
Oh, for sure.
It's like that's like the number one thing. It's like, if you're being like, oh man, well, they made me feel like this. Well, it's like, well, did you ever ask them how they felt?
And also, to go off that, they didn't make you feel that way. You felt that way. It's a choice, really. I mean, it's not an easy choice to say, oh, I'm not going to let this affect me, because sometimes you can be exposed to some nasty stuff.
Right.
But in reality, if you just understand that nobody's out there waking up, like for me, so nobody's going to wake up in the morning like, I'm going to go ruin Wayne's day. As long as you understand that, and understand that maybe you're talking to somebody at 2 p.m., right? You understand that within maybe the 6 hours or so that they've been awake, something bad might have happened, and now they're just being mean to you because they've just had enough of the day. Yeah. It's not your fault, really. That's somebody who could probably use a little bit of help.
Yeah.
So
especially when sometimes when you like, it's fun too to ask people like about their day. If you're the type of guy too where people will talk to, but sometimes you'll realize like, oh man, you know why they're having a bad day? Because they just found out something really awful. Like maybe they just had to put their dog down. Maybe they just did this, and then but on the backside of that, you'll hear about people's successes. How good does it feel to hear about other people's successes?
Oh, it's the best.
If you're the type of person that doesn't get jealous, but you envy success, dude, it's awesome. I love it, man. I love hearing about people's successes. I think it's such a good thing, because and what's cool too is when you learn about their success, then if you're the type of person that's like, oh, I want to be successful, you found a successful person, you're just a few questions away from figuring out how they got successful.
Yeah, man.
Or created, something good happen.
Right. And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head there with talking about how maybe somebody's just gotten some pretty bad news.
Yeah.
It happened multiple times throughout my life where I would be making somebody coffee one day and they were just being nasty to me, like nasty, calling me bad stuff, stuff that in the workplace, not acceptable.
Yeah,
right?
HR.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, just on the other side of that, like a customer, it's like, oh my God, why are you doing that? And then the next, you see him a week later, I've multiple times people had come back in and apologized to me and saying stuff like, there was one time a gentleman came in, just let me have it for no reason. And this guy that I had seen often, and he knew who I was and I knew who he was, and he just let me have it one day. And I was like, that's weird, and made me feel gross. I didn't like that. Comes back the next day, apologizes to me. Turns out his father had died, and he found out that morning. Yeah. You never really know what somebody's going through. And if you keep that in mind, it's a little bit easier to handle some of the adversity you might experience from other people.
Right. Understanding intent, man.
Exactly.
His intent is probably just to vent.
He needed it.
Or he needed to get something else out. We can't control some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. Like it's not great that happened to you and somebody ruined Wayne's day, but think about what he was going through was 10 times worse.
Yeah. And we also have to understand people don't always have the emotional knowledge, like they don't understand how to interpret or express their emotions in a healthy way that helps them cope with a hard time. And unfortunately, sometimes we are the punching bag, right? Yeah. And it's not our fault that they don't know how to handle those emotions, but as long as you understand that they are not your mortal enemy.
Yeah, it wasn't personal.
It was never personal.
Never directed towards you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like one thing I learned so far too and I think I learned this before, but this just adds on to it, is like you realize how lucky men like you and I are in this day and age where we can be emotional.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, on Flo's episode, she talks about her dad who was shot in World War I, and he was in the trenches in World War I. And she said, they were the silent generation, they were hard. Those men were hard for survival. And, you know, a lot of them ended up with alcoholism and a lot of other things because they didn't have the emotional freedom, I'll say, because of maybe the view on society then. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something I've taken away from this is how lucky we are, especially being a father of girls, is being able to navigate your emotions. You know, I'm not always the best at it, but what I realize is how important it is for my kids to be able to show their emotions or to talk about them. And especially when they go through hard times, you know, like my daughter's been through a lot more than most 10-year-olds. And and I know that she knows that I'm there for her emotionally. And that's like, God, and there's times where I feel so lucky. Right. I feel so lucky that we grew up right now in a time. I'll never stop growing up, but you know, right. I'm in my adulthood, and I feel so lucky that we're in a time where men can express their emotions freely. And I don't think it's because we're in a secure environment, right? We're in a secure enough area where our emotions are not going to cause a danger to us unless we take it over the top, but that gets past the regulatory emotions.
Unless we get to a point where we don't know how to express them the right way. Right. Yeah, that could be too much. Yeah.
Right. But that's one thing I really appreciate that I'd like for our generation and, you know, other people to understand how lucky we are too as a society where it's a lot more supportive now.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, this is a new thing, right? Where guys are able to, because even this, I'm sure people might see this and be like, well, we don't need it, you know, all that stuff. And that's okay to believe, like, that's fine. But as long as you understand, like, you still are a human, right? Yeah. And you're going to have stuff that's going to make you feel big stuff, right? You're going to feel bad. You're going to feel sad. You're not going to understand, right? It's, we are incredibly lucky. And I think the mental health stigma on guys, it's very unfortunate that it exists, right? But, you know, if you ever had a good guy friend, right, just like your best friend, just you having that person in your life. We're not saying that you got to go to therapy. Nobody's saying you have to do all this stuff if you're not ready for that, right? Right. But if you have a person in your life who's receptive, right, who you can talk to.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is one of the. I've had this argument with people about things I went through where I was looking up a counselor and stuff like that, and I went to one. I felt way better because I have such a good group of friends. I have the best friends. My friends are so cool, man. I'm so lucky where I'm able to call them for anything, and that goes back to the point that we're all in this together, man. I've heard, you know, from my girlfriend Allie that we're all just walking each other home. That was one of the best things I ever heard.
That's a great,
yeah, we really are, and what a gift to have good friends and good family that you can confide in because it really helps. It's nice, man. That I'm sure there's, you know, people out there that hide their emotions and things like that, and it's you'll realize quickly that once you're able to break that barrier, the world gets a lot prettier.
Oh man, and there's a lot to be happy about. Especially with everything telling you that you shouldn't be happy with anything at the moment. Yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for and happy about, and you should always surround yourself with people who recognize that, find the good things. People who I always try to surround myself with people who are better than me. Yeah, or at least I think they are, because that makes me feel like I got to keep going. I gotta, you know, push a bit harder, be better, stuff like that. And people who are smarter than me help me understand stuff. Having a good group of friends who want the best for you, that's very key. Yeah.
That's one thing you'll see with the people we've interviewed. They all, so Dolly and Marjorie, childhood best friends from Pennsylvania. Right. They live here now. That's because crazy. They're your best friends. Yeah. 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 You'll realize, and a lot of people, it's funny. You're bringing up having a best friend or a sidekick. And it's like what I see with everybody we've interviewed so far, they've either had that through a friend or a spouse, right? You know? And I was like, man, that, or their children. Right. And it's like, God, that's really, it's just cool to see that. Like I think I said on one of the podcasts, like nobody's truly independent, you know, we're all in this together. And that's one thing that these lessons that you learn from interviewing people with the most life experience. I was going to ask you, since you do all the editing, which I appreciate.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And, so far when you're going through these clips, have you had any reflection? Is there something that stood out to you that maybe you've been like, oh, I can relate to that, or advice that you'd take forward?
Oh man. Well, something that I love to see in the episode, something that really sticks out to me is we can have whoever on, right? And it's always towards the end of the episode, it kind of circles back to kindness to your fellow person.
Yeah.
Right. We can spend the entire first episode talking about things that are going wrong, right? We can talk about, oh man, this is different when I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. But then you talk about what's one thing that you really appreciate? What's one thing that, you ask them that question and they'll bring something up about when either they help somebody or somebody helped them. And finding that lowest common denominator and all these different people, it kind of really made me think. I was like, well, if that's the thing that everybody's doing right, that they appreciate the most, then maybe that's something that we should all kind of focus on, right? And so that, and also just they all seem to have a huge appreciation for family as well. It's a huge portion of what they talk about, appreciating your family, and especially for people who are a bit younger. Sometimes it can be, especially when you're in high school, right? I know everybody in high school, the thing people say is, oh, you have a kid in high school? Oh man, good luck. Blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. It's because you don't really understand how much you appreciate your family until your frontal lobe is completely developed, right? And
as long as you have a good family, for sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And what's crazy about this generation is they're talking about the family that a lot of them, because some of them didn't have kids. So you see them talk about their parents. Yeah. But then the ones that have kids, it's weird because they talk about their kids. Isn't that, I think that's really neat.
That's really cool. Yeah. And, but the single biggest thing though, from all these interviews that I've taken away as a young person, I also watched the episodes a few times because before I upload it, right? I seeing them talk about something very hard in a way that if it happened to me, I probably wouldn't be talking about it the same way. But they were able to handle all that with grace, with dignity, and come out on the other side proud of this terrible thing because of the way that they were able to turn it into something good. Man, it's honestly inspiring to see. Where, it's easy to be like, this is terrible, right? This is so bad. I guess I'll wait until the good stuff starts happening again. No, this bad thing can be a good thing. And hearing them say that over and over again in different fonts, pretty much, right? It gives me a lot of hope, I guess.
Isn't it weird to look at time? And time can be so beautiful, yet so harsh at the same time.
Depending on how you spend it, right?
Yeah. And like when you're going through those times, you're going through some, because you need time to tell you. I've taught, in many conversations with people over the years, I've said, without time, we have nothing.
Oh yeah.
Like if you have a trait of yourself, like, oh, Wayne's a happy person. Well, he was only happy for a second until that guy came in and ruined Wayne's day.
Right.
Like 99% of the time, Wayne is a happy guy, right?
Yeah.
That makes him a happy person. So every trait or anything we do, it's pretty obvious, but it only exists over time, right? So you need to understand also with like the way your mechanisms or the way you manage your life, time is going to tell. So and I think that's the scary part of it when you're in the hard times. You're like, is what I'm doing going to help me out of this? But then that might take a year. But like you said, with some of these individuals that we've interviewed, when you're reflecting 50 years back, they say it nonchalantly because of the way time, the way we perceive life and the way we absorb things in our filters. And I don't know if you remember, but when Flo, she brought up in her episode where she's like, things she said, I can't remember the exact, I'm paraphrasing here, but she was like, I thought I forgot about these things, but they'll sneak up and remind me every once in a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, man. And I was like, it's so incredible, you know, and I've had that happen recently with like a memory from my grandma. I talk to my grandparents very often on the phone, and I have this thing where I like to try fish and chips at places, man. You know, and I always I knew I had something sentimental about it. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to my grandma the other day, and she was like, "Oh, we went, and me and Papa," they call my grandpa Papa. Mm-hmm. We went to town. You know, they'll drive like 2 hours to Portland. They're crazy. They're 90 and 87. They're amazing. And I'm gonna get in trouble again for saying my grandma's age. Dang it.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, but my grandma's like, "Yeah, me and Papa stopped it. We got fish and chips and all this stuff." And because she mentioned Portland and fish and chips, I went back to a memory of a child with them having fish and chips at this restaurant that used to be a sternwheeler or a boat. I think it was on the Willamette. I can't remember exactly, but we would go there and we'd have fish and chips. And I remember the first time I put lemon on it, and I was sitting there, I was like, I told my grandma, I was like, "Oh my God," I was losing it. I'm like, "Grandma, you have no idea how sentimental that is to me." And I didn't know why.
Yeah.
Until you just brought that up and put me in that place. And dude, I was like, God, like it took me back to Flow, where she talks about how things will pop up.
Yeah.
And you're not going to figure them out, but later they'll show up in your life. And like, you know, this is 30 years later. And I was like, oh man, I was so thankful. So thankful. It was, it's really, I got like emotional about it. It was so cool. I love my grandparents.
Yeah. Oh man, those are the best when all of a sudden something just snaps into place.
Yeah.
It's the best, man. So as somebody who's interviewing these people though, was there ever a moment where somebody was like talking or you asked a question, they responded a certain way that like kind of surprised you the way they answered that question, where maybe you were expecting a negative answer and they gave something totally what you were not expecting?
You know, I'm going to say no. And here's why. I have no expectations with what they're going to say. You know, mostly like I've really met almost everybody we've interviewed for the first time right here.
Oh,
and I don't know, man. I kind of go into it with an open mind. I don't, is there things that obviously there's a lot of the questions I appreciate, but I don't really have expectations. But what I would say was, I think one thing that was really stuck, what really stuck with me was, there's a few of them, but I think when Bill Malley was talking about coming to the United States at 14 and he had to get taken back in school because he didn't know English.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he knew, you know, the words like dog and cat and home, but he spoke French. And I was just thinking how hard it would have been at that age, because you're pretty developed at 14.
Yeah, you remember that stuff.
To be kicked back. You know, I don't know how I don't know if he felt degraded. I don't know how those men felt there. You know, I was letting him just tell the story. But I was thinking personally, man, it would feel like all those years of hard work had been set back. And then I was thinking, what a challenge, you know? And I know multiple people like that in their adulthood, but you know, they were able to grow up in their country, but this is like starting your childhood over again, you know, in a sense of intellectual capability within your community, or I should say your intellectual capability is there. You're just not able to communicate it.
Right.
And I was thinking, God, and then he becomes a pharmacist, you know, and he's a very loved pharmacist. A lot of people watch that.
Incredibly intelligent as well.
Yeah. And he's funny, and he's a great, and he has a great family. I know his family, you know, like his grandson's one of my best friends, and he just has a great family. I just appreciated that one about him. But I think going back, you know, looking at one thing I really appreciated too, because I kind of have this similar mindset, was when Dolly talked about how coming out of the Depression, her parents were her dad's idea to be successful and to take care of his family was he spent the money on the table. He
Yeah.
spent the money on the food for their health, because without their health, I think, he probably knew that they didn't have, what do you have without your health?
Right. She mentioned that right away too. That was something that I could tell was pretty stood out to her.
Well, and a lot of people, I don't think she said her exact age, but she kind of gave a hint towards it. She doesn't even look close to her age.
No,
It's
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I hope people take that away, that how important your health is, and especially your diet. We get thrown a lot of garbage and stuff like that. Man. But yeah,
we've already had all these amazing guests. And I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but prospective guests coming up.
Yeah.
Very, very excited about it. I think if this all works out with some of these people, I think some of the viewers might be a little bit surprised that we were able to get these people. Right. But what do you have planned moving forward aside from guests?
I think that kind of goes to, before we step into, like, I don't know if we should name, I don't want to upset people,
not yet,
we'll give it ideas, but here's what I'll go to, because you and I've talked about this. I have no fear of going and talking to people. I have no fear. Like, what do you have to lose, right? Like what do you tried. That's all you got.
Yeah.
So I reach out to these people that are 70 plus years old, and I'm always paying attention, always talking to people, and I've talked to like I ran into somebody we got delayed at the. Well, we got delayed a lot recently with Delta.
So what? That's crazy.
Yeah. So I recently went when I was coming back from Miami there last week. We got delayed overnight in Seattle, and we didn't get back here till the next day. But we, I'm coming off the thing, and I see somebody with a B-52, bomber hat on, Vietnam War vet.
Oh wow!
Had to talk to him.
Yeah.
So this guy, dude, some stuff. And we're looking at getting him on.
Where's he from?
Actually, he lives down in Roseburg, Oregon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was traveling for a wedding. This guy's cool, really cool. And he started telling me stuff, and I was kind of like, hey, if you're doing the podcast, don't tell me, because I like it to be organic, and I want to know first.
Right.
I just saw that you had the sweet hat on, and that there's a lot involved with that. And then, you and I both are fans of comedy. Mm-hmm. So I try to track down some older comedy people that are on the spotlight. And I think we're going to put that one together.
I'm really excited.
I'm really rooting. I know you are.
Fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah. And then also we're in election season. So I'm diving into some political figures.
That's the one that I'm excited about.
Yeah. This guy, I hope it works. I've met him before. I've done a meeting with him when he was a congressman, and I can tell you I would like to think I'm a good judge of character. And when you hear all this about politicians and things like that, but when I met with this guy, he didn't know me anytime or anything like that. And he seemed so genuine. And very, I would say, of his presence. Well, there's people that take the air out of the room.
Oh yeah,
he's that type of person, but in a good way. It's you kind of have this instant envy of him, or you're curious about him. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'd love to get him on. I think a lot of these people are gonna have to Zoom podcast because it's busy season and traveling here and things like that. Which I'm pretty proud of the studio, but we're okay with doing that to get these people to the consumer. But that being said, I want people to know, if you're listening to this or consuming this, however you're listening or watching, that we here at the podcast studio, we just people that are 70 years old or older. I installed a stair chair lift in my house to get people, even if they're immobile or whatever, if we can get them here, and we try and create a great experience for everybody. We don't want any risk, and we want to make them feel comfortable when they're here. So don't hesitate if you have any thoughts or questions about it that you might talk yourself out of it. What we're trying to do is talk yourself into it, because with your loved ones or people that you look up to, we're building this to get their stories also for you to have forever, because, like we said, time is also a pretty rough thing, and we know what our fate is in the end when it comes to being there in person. And that's really part of this, is to make sure that people get the opportunity to get their loved ones' stories. And we're open to all inquiries about it. And I think just so people know too, we also want to offer this as a service. You know, we've put this together. So if your loved one is kind of shy about being on, you know, cameras or getting onto social media, we can create an interview with them, and we can give it to you privately, and you can secure it. You can hold on to it, you know, watch it later on, whenever, watch it with them. But that's a service that we're going to be offering privately, where you can pay us to give you an interview with your loved ones, so you have it forever. And it's a priceless gift. There's no better gift. You know, the most consistent regret I heard traveling was, I still hear it all the time, I wish I would have got my loved one's stories. You know how many people have reached out to me? I bet you a lot. Just commenting on things. I wish my grandpa was still alive. Mm-hmm. I wish my dad was still alive. I wish my grandma. I wish my mom. I wish my uncle. Yeah. And that's really why, that was the motivating factor. That's the one that tipped us over for doing this.
And everybody's story deserves to be told.
Absolutely.
Whether it be publicly or privately, everybody's life experiences are valid, and there's a lot to be learned from them. And if they don't want them online, I know, at least for myself, having, say, my grandpa's stories saved out, even just for me, that would have been priceless. But that's all to say, you know, if you're watching this and part of you's like, well, maybe I won't reach out because I don't even know if it'd be that interesting. I promise you. I promise you. Yeah. It is. It is worth the time. And the other thing about all this is, it can be a bit scary to be interviewed by somebody and have it go on the internet or whatever, or you're not sure how it's going to. We're not out here doing gotcha journalism. We're here to make your loved ones look good. We both firmly believe that all this is about getting important stories and important life experiences out there. Not to make, our job is to make those people look good, because they are.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. You know, there's a lot of hesitancy in people that are maybe a little self-critical or things like that. But we are very careful with what we do, and we protect people's anything that we think is, and we speak with them. We don't just do it without asking, but we talk to them and we verify, is there anything you said you want us to edit out? Mm-hmm. We will pull out anything that we think might be detrimental to your character.
No questions asked.
No questions asked. Yeah, we that's not our intent. Yeah, we're not out here trying to. There's no hidden agenda. The agenda's out in the open, and it's a beautiful agenda. I believe in it through and through.
Unfortunately, there are people out on popular media out here, who really are out there for themselves, and they hear a crazy story that maybe this person doesn't want out there, but they're going to use it for their gain. We both also firmly believe that the stories that we put out are valuable enough that we don't need that extra spice in controversy. We don't need that. It's never worth it. We would never harm the integrity of our project or the integrity of the person that we're interviewing.
That's just not in our soul.
No.
Like neither one of us. And it's kind of like, it's pretty effortless not to do that, which I'm pretty proud of, that you and I are not like that. That's why I really appreciate that you've jumped on the project, because there's a lot of beauty in it. When you're doing something for others, it's like I think our selfish reasons in this are not selfish. You know what I mean? Like the things that we take, the value and the reward that we get is it's a very selfless act. And I think that's the beauty of it. I think I love that, man. Because I self-reflect, and I'm like, man, am I being this? Am I doing that? Because I don't force anybody to come in here. We're not forcing them down here, nothing like that. No. So it's fun. What else? I was going to talk about something else here. I was thinking, we were talking about if you're not close. We're located in Tri-Cities, Washington, or I am. Wayne's down in Oregon across the border. But we also are looking at traveling too. You know, like if you have somebody that you really want their story, which I've had people hit me up, down in Florida, we got some Purple Heart recipients and some other people that they've reached out and be like, hey, are you coming? People know I love to travel. Yeah. And, so that's something too. So yeah, just any questions you have where you think it's going to talk you out of it. If you have a hint that you want this, call us. You can call me. You can message me, private message me on one of the social media pages, and we will get back to you. And I'm looking for those messages because we want to give this to you. We built this for that. And we can pack up and go too. We can pack the kit up and we can travel.
Oh, for sure. We have travel cases for all this stuff. And if you want to get a hold of us, I guess, number one, website will be up pretty soon here. If it's not up by the time this comes out, it will be shortly after. Other thing, if you want to message us on YouTube or if you're finding us on TikTok, we check all of our messages on every platform. As well as we will link the email that you can get a hold of us at in the description of this video, so you can reach out, let us know all that we need to know. We'll do most of the effort. We'll take care of what needs to be taken care of. All we need to know is person's name, age, who they are, just a little bit about them, so we know what we're going after here. And from there, we'll just be in contact with you, and if it works out, we'll take care of the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also if you have anybody that you want to share this with, or your loved ones that aren't computer savvy, like you said, we're on YouTube. Take your phone. You can. We got many ways for them to watch it, and I know that's one thing that's been helpful so far is with people that once we started to get out episodes, because they were coming in blind. Now we can send them a link and be like, hey, watch this. Are you comfortable with this one?
Right.
This is the setting. And I will say, I got to go back on something you said a little bit ago. You're wondering if you're going to be comfortable. So the next episode that's coming out with Marjorie, she talks about that.
Oh, she does.
She says how comfortable she felt. That was one of the best things I've heard.
Yeah. We make sure that's the number one priority, is that you're okay with being interviewed and you're okay talking with us. And if you don't feel good, we won't start yet. We just want the best for whoever is sitting in this chair right here.
Right. What one last thing before we go, Wayne, what would you like to see going forward? Like when you're doing the editing and you're looking at this as far as content, how to get us where we can improve our quality, things like that.
Right.
Because this is all self-funded. We're not making any money off of this, but what is something we can look for that would help us get this studio better? If people have content issues, what do you think we're going to come out with on the? Right.
So I guess on my end, as far as production goes, what the viewers can expect. This is all done. Me and David and your girlfriend.
Allie.
Oh yeah. I wasn't sure if you want me to say anything.
Yeah.
This is all done kind of in house here, and it's never really been about the money. It's never been, but we want the best for our viewers and our guests. So moving forward, what we kind of expect is we hope to improve our camera quality, because not spitting on this camera, this is a good camera, but we want to improve our camera quality, get a couple more cameras. We want to improve, we might want to be able to travel a bit and make sure that we have the funds to do that. That's kind of where we're looking to expand, because everything that we invest our money into here, or invest back into the business, that's going to go directly to improving the show itself and making sure that we can continue to deliver quality content on our end. And there's a couple ways that I think that we've talked about going about that, because we never want to just straight up say, ask for money. If there's in the future, what you can expect is the way that we might go about getting the money to improve all this and give you a better product. What I would expect to see is, we've talked about starting a Patreon account where we deliver extra content. We make some stuff for those people.
Yeah. Can I chime in on that real quick?
Go right ahead.
Yeah. And we're actually, I have some incredible younger individuals that are, you know, in our generations that have been through, I would call hell, like, or, you know, cancer, different things in life, very successful things, but things that are going to be really important too for generations to see. And I think also maybe even for the older generations to see that this stuff is affecting the younger generation too, and to bridge that gap. But Monday I'm interviewing my friend Dallas, who just finished his 100 days after a bone marrow transplant.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm getting, yes. And this guy is a great dad. He's a local dentist, great human. And, I can't wait to get that one on. And that one is going to be on Patreon, because we don't want to, you know, like we have our intent with this, but that's going to be this content. That's just one example, but we have many others lined up.
Yeah. And so, on the main channel, the stuff that's free, of course, we'll get to a point where we are generating ad revenue, because we want to take as much pressure off the viewer as possible. You can expect to see Wrinkled Wisdom as is, right? We have our individuals here who are over the age of 70, and that's what you're going to get every week. It's still great quality content. You can expect that every week. But on the Patreon, you can expect to see content that is going to relate to that generation, and continue to give more perspective, maybe from a younger generation looking up at that generation, right? So still going to be on-brand content, but maybe a little bit more in depth, maybe a little bit more stuff that you wouldn't normally see on the main channel. Great content, great people. We set the bar pretty high for ourselves as far as this goes. And as time goes on, the quality of this podcast is going to improve, even from, I mean, day one, I walked in here and I was blown away by the studio. We started out way better, way higher quality than I could have ever hoped to join a product with this quality on day one. And it's only up from here. Also, we also want to give back to our guests whenever possible, right? So we've talked a bit about, once that website's up, there will probably be a way for people who would like to donate, which we would never ask for, but people who would like to donate to this project, there will be a way to do that on the website. And we're going to get that set up here pretty soon. And to those people who feel that they would like to give back to this project, I mean, in advance, a huge thanks to those people. Because this is something that David, this has been a huge dream of his, and working with him has given me a huge sense of fulfillment. And if you'd like to contribute to all this as well, there's a way for you to do that. Yeah.
And on that note too, anything to support the project, you know, we appreciate the viewership alone, because time is valuable. And I know many people have families and other things. And the fact that you spend your time, absorbing these people's stories it just speaks volumes about where, you know, what we're doing and who we are. And when we can level up our podcast too, like we talked about with travel, like we said, we want to be able to make it where we are efficiently and making it, I would say, effective to travel and come to people, because we know that some people cannot travel, you know, just like a lady the other day, I went and picked her up because she can't, you know, drive during that time of the day. So, you know, luckily she's local, but we're going to have to do there's, you know, traveling involved, because we do not want it to be secluded to people that are local, because my network is large enough where I know people, you know, all across the country, and we want to give them the availability too. So, with that being said, I just, we really appreciate everybody that's consumed the content so far. Our guests that have came on, many thanks to them. And, like we said, don't be shy. Give us a shout. We love what we do, and we'll make it a good experience for you. Yeah. And I got to thank Wayne. For doing all the dirty work. I got to do the fun part.
Yeah. You probably won't see me in front of the camera a whole lot, but, I appreciate you letting me work on this, and to the viewer, really appreciate you giving us your time. We know how valuable that is, and if there's anything that you'd like to see from us, or if you'd like to get your loved one on here, please reach out. We're very receptive. We just want to give you the best. So
and one last note: if you're a podcaster of any network that you're involved in, and you want to support what we're doing and be a part of it, we're open to guest spots, chatting. I mean, you know, getting on a phone call, radio show, whatever. We want people to know about this, especially since not all of that generation is on the internet. We want to bridge that gap. So any way we can get out and tell what we're up to.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Check out the episodes. They're fun.
Yeah. Check out our previous episodes. They're all great. Also, if you have social media, we're on a lot of socials now. Go give us a follow there. We would greatly appreciate that.
Wrinkled Wisdom.
Yeah, Wrinkled.wisdom on TikTok. Find us on Facebook. Find us on pretty much anything. So, yeah. Anyways, David, thanks for letting me sit in the chair today.
Man. Good times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully you're not 70 next time.
We'll see. Perfect.